But there was another thing that happened that was interesting. I was always asking people questions about related to my vocation, and I once asked my pastor, I said, what do you think about church planting? His response was, we need them. And I thought, wow, I really need to be thinking about church planting. And then I had other conversations with people about church planting and the relationship to pastoral ministry, and I was thinking, wow, maybe this is something I really need to do. Here's the thing, though. If you want a church plant situation to not work out, I'm your guy, okay? I'm really not the church planting kind of guy. And I knew that I wasn't the church planting kind of guy. But because I wanted to be someone who was asking God, what should I do? I would often consider things that just weren't me, but just because somebody was passionate about it, or just because there was a need. Now, perhaps you've had this experience at Wheaton College. Lots of people standing here, perhaps, say great things, passionate things about God's kingdom work. There are lots of different facets of God's kingdom work that you can hear about over a year. And of course, being good, high-achieving people that you are, I mean, you can think, wow, I should do that, or that, or that, or that, or that. I mean, you're getting yanked around because you want to do God's will, and there's so many good things you can do. What I want to say is just exhale. Just exhale. Because for one thing, you're only one person. You yourself can't replicate yourself and do all of God's kingdom work. Now, sure, it would be great if one of us was the great example of omnicompetence, the person with all the gifts, all the abilities, who could do everything. But nobody's that way. And it's okay that nobody's that way. That's what 1 Corinthians 12 to 14 is all about, is the fact that there are many people, different gifts, different talents. We need all of them. They can do all kinds of different things. When you're presented with all these great opportunities, it's okay to learn about them. It's okay sometimes to consider them. It's a great thing to pray for them. But it's okay if you don't have to do all of them. Because you can't do all of them. You can't do most of them. You can maybe do one or two in your life. And that's all right. Trust me, it's really all right. So I go to seminary, recognizing that being a church planter was not a good idea. But thinking I should still be a pastor. And an interesting thing happened. I was starting to have a little sense of discomfort about whether I should be a pastor. But I didn't know what to do with that. And here's the divine irony. The Navigators, you have to understand, are a very, very practically oriented group. People like me who teach theology, they would say, read what those people write, but you don't want to be those people. Well, many of them do, trust me. And the irony was, I made all A's my first quarter at Trinity, and a Navigator guy says to me, Vince, a guy like you ought to get a PhD. And then he started talking about what I could do with a PhD, and it was like someone flipping on a light. I saw possibilities for my life I'd never seen before. But here's the problem. I had told so many people that I was going to be a pastor that I was fearful of disappointing all those people. Fearful that people who were very practically oriented would say, okay, you sure you want to do that? But here's the thing that happened. I'll use one example. There's a friend of mine, he's a pastor now. He had come up through the Navigators. We were coming back from lunch one day at seminary. So we're driving along, he drove. And he says, Vince, I want to tell you something. And this is a compliment. I don't see you as a senior pastor. Now, I don't know how that was supposed to be a compliment, but it was in the moment. But then he began to talk about why. And he put his finger on the pulse. Because for me, being a senior pastor would have stifled my scholarly bent. It would discard the fact that I'm just kind of an intellectual kind of guy. That's just who I am. And I've always been that way. And the thing that happened is that person after person after person after person would say, when I told them that I was going to go to get a PhD, that makes sense. And some people even said, it really makes sense because I could never really understand why you wanted to be a senior pastor. So I go towards being a PhD student. I went to Drew University, and through a whole series of events, I wind up teaching here with one chapter of my dissertation done, and I'm standing in front of you here today, tenured and director of the Center for Applied Christian Ethics. Here's the thing that you have to know about that story so far. While I was moving forward that way, there were a couple of companions that I had with me: unbelief and fear. And they kind of worked together. Initially, in college, I had unbelief that God had even gifted me to do anything. People would sometimes say to me, "Vince, I think you're an extraordinarily gifted guy." My response was, "I'm not listening. I can't afford to listen. I can't risk listening to that because of a fear about failure. If I believe you, if I operate like I've got some gifts, and if I step out and try to do something, and if I fail, am I going to be a laughingstock? Am I going to be humiliated? Am I going to have the public telling me, 'You're not gifted, you're a nobody'?" That was a constant companion, a loud voice. And then there was unbelief about the fact that once I did believe, after the influence of many people, that I did have gifts, I didn't believe that I'd really ever get in the game. It was like, okay, so I'm gifted, but now my place is to watch other people have successes, watch other people have opportunities. And my fear was that I would live a life of spectacular insignificance. But here's the thing. I'm standing in front of you in 2009 as a professor at Wheaton College. I'm tenured. I'm an author. There's all these things that have happened that have said no to my unbelief and said no to my fear. Chances are that some of you battle unbelief or fear some of the time. It's easy sometimes at a place like Wheaton College, where everybody works hard and everybody achieves, to think that everybody's confident. But I wonder who has the voice of unbelief? Who's got the voice of fear telling you, you better achieve, because when you don't, you're nobody. When you don't, you're going to get sidelined. Friends, I want to say to you, if you're hearing those voices, I'm a living witness that you can, instead of listening to those voices, listen to God, look to God, who extends his hand to you and says, "Come on, walk with me. We'll take it step by step, and we'll go through this life together." It might be really exciting sometimes, might be kind of mundane sometimes, but come on, walk with me. And if you walk with me, you'll see incredible things happen, things you can't even imagine.